Okay, let's unpack something that, well, it captures the imagination like almost nothing else. Owning your very own island.
Right. It's the ultimate dream for many, isn't it? Movies, books.
Exactly. Maybe even supervillain layers, who knows? But what does that dream actually look like, today in the real world?
That's what we're digging into.
We've pulled together quite a stack of material for this deep dive. Everything from market reports and these really dense guides on island development.
Like how you actually build stuff on a remote rock.
Yeah. To fictional satire, environmental critiques, and even, frankly, a look at security fears, which isn't often talked about.
Right. So our mission really is to cut through that fantasy,
Yeah.
to understand the complex reality of owning a private island now in the 21st century.
We want to look beyond the postcard image.
Exactly. To the eye-watering costs, the huge challenges of development, that environmental tightrope you have to walk.
And the security, the intense security concerns that apparently come with this level of wealth and, well, isolation.
Hmm. It's a fascinating window, really, into a pretty exclusive world.
What most of us won't ever inhabit, but it reflects some really interesting trends about wealth, privacy, maybe control. So let's dive in.
Okay.
The enduring appeal, that dream of a private island. It feels like the ultimate escape, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The sources really lean into that. It's like the peak of exclusivity.
Total anonymity, if you want it.
And that pure connection with nature, unmediated, plus maybe the biggest draw. A totally clean slate, a place to build whatever you can imagine.
And it seems that desire has really ramped up recently.
Oh, definitely. Since 2020, it surged quite dramatically. The pandemic was a huge accelerator.
How so?
Well, things like absolute privacy, better security, self-sufficiency, they suddenly became much more appealing to certain people.
Right.
Plus, remote working actually proved viable for many. So the idea of doing that from somewhere really remote, like your own island, it suddenly seemed more practical if you had the means.
You even see this idea pop up in fiction, like that graphic novel, Billionaire Island.
Yes, freedom unlimited.
That's the one. An artificial island. Basically a refuge for the super rich as the world collapses outside.
Complete with drone defenses, no taxes.
And some. Well, let's just say questionable menu items from endangered species.
Right. It's satire, obviously, but it really nails that core idea. The island is the ultimate separation from society's problems.
But it makes you think how quickly that romantic dream runs into, well, the practicalities and the potential problems of extreme isolation and, all that concentrated wealth.
Exactly. It's a dream that takes incredible resources just to build, let alone maintain.
Which brings us right to the big question, who is actually buying these places? And what are we talking about price-wise?
Well, the sources point to the usual suspects. Billionaires, high net worth individuals, celebrity.
And corporations, too, increasingly.
Yeah, it's a growing trend. And the prices.
Yeah.
Wow, they span a colossal range.
Then what's the low end?
You could, theoretically, find something like a beachfront lot on an island, say in Belize, for maybe $33,000.
Okay, so just a piece of land.
Pretty much. But then you leap to things like Rangai Island in Thailand, listed for $160 million.
Wow.
Or think about Larry Ellison buying 98% of Lanai in Hawaii. That was reported at $300 million.
$300 million for most of an island. That's practically buying a small country.
It's on another scale entirely. The worldwide average, if you can call it that, is apparently around $6 million, but that hides huge variations.
Right. Depends where you look. Cheaper in Canada or Central America, maybe.
Or, yeah, more expensive in Europe, the Bahamas, Oceania.
And we see some big names. You mentioned Ellison.
Ekaterina Ribble-Livleva paid $150 million for Scorpios, the Onassis Island in Greece. Richard Branson famously got Necker Island decades ago for, what was it, $120,000.
Unbelievable. A bargain then? Impossible now.
Totally. More recently, he paid $12.6 million for Mosquito Island nearby.
And Mark Zuckerberg, he's been buying land too, right?
Yeah, he and Priscilla Chan have reportedly spent over $170 million on land on Kauai since 2014.
So it really hammers home that the purchase price is often just the starting point.
Exactly. It's just the ante, like you said. And the real challenge, the supply of genuinely private islands is actually limited and shrinking.
Shrinking? Why?
Governments, conservation trusts, they've been buying them up. Globally, about 140 between 95 and 2019, most of those in North America.
Huh. So finding one is hard, but finding a good one.
That's the bottleneck. One with potential, maybe some existing infrastructure. That's much harder.
Okay, so these islands, they become more than just fancy holiday homes. They're They're canvases for projecting visions, creating personal kingdoms, as one source put it.
Personal kingdoms. I think that's a pretty good description because the motivations and the projects are so diverse.
Like what?
Well, you've got people trying to create sustainable paradises or living experiments.
Mm.
Dietrich Mateschitz, the Red Bull founder, built an amazing eco-resort on Locala.
Right. And Ellison on Lanai, that's meant to be a sustainability prototype.
Reportedly, yes.
Yeah.
A $340 million project.
Right.
Branson's also heavily focused on sustainability on Mosquito.
Then there's the pure ultra-luxury angle, wellness retreats and things.
Absolutely. Locala is also a high-end resort. Vela in the Maldives, apparently a $200 million development, has things like snow rooms, submarine treatment.
Snow rooms in the Maldives.
Apparently so. Scorpios is being turned into this ultra-exclusive wellness place, renting for maybe €1 million a week.
A week?
Yeah. And Necker Island, of course, basically set the template for luxury island rentals.
But then there's the other side. The privacy, the control, almost fortress-like places.
Definitely. You see that too. The Barclay brothers built that huge Gothic castle on Brecco, used it partly as a tax domicile.
Right, I remember reading about that.
John Malone closed his public resort on Samson Cay, made it totally private. Controversial move.
And Zuckerberg again, with those alleged plans for bunkers and tunnels on Kauai, that fits this pattern.
It certainly fits the trend of highly secure, self-sustaining estates. Leans into that vanish off the face of the planet idea.
Makes sense.
But islands can also be bases for business, philanthropy, conservation, like Branson uses Necker. It's not always just leisure.
And the cruise lines, too. That's a big one.
Oh, yeah. They acquire or develop islands, Coco Cay, Half Moon Cay, Castaway Cay, to create these totally controlled, exclusive experiences for passengers. They build massive amenities, even their own piers.
Okay, so let's say you've bought your island. You have your vision, sustainable paradise, luxury resort, private fortress. How do you actually build it? One of our sources, this detailed guide, really lays out the massive practicalities and the costs.
It's a colossal undertaking. Seriously, it starts way before you hammer a single nail.
Yeah.
First, define the visionresort.home research station.
Got it.
Then you need incredibly detailed site data, bathymetry that's mapping the water depth around the island, topography and the land's contours, surveys. All that feeds into a comprehensive master plan and detailed architectural designs. You need that locked down first.
I'm just picturing the logistics, getting cement or steel beams to a remote island.
It's a huge challenge. Site prep alone is
Yeah.
massive. Clearing land, testing soil, building roads, pathways, ideally sustainable ones, and crucially, docks or piers.
For transport.
Absolutely critical. Because everything comes by sea. Materials, equipment, food, supplies. That dock is a major investment itself. Plus, temporary housing for workers, laying groundwork for utilities.
Utilities. Okay, power and fresh water on a remote island. That sounds like the biggest hurdle.
They are absolutely critical, which is why sustainable building choices are key. Using eco-friendly materials, reclaimed wood, bamboo, recycled steel, certain types of concrete.
Makes sense.
And design principles, like passive solar, using the building's position to heat or cool it naturally. Good insulation, ventilation, low-flow water fixtures. It all cuts down the energy and water needed later.
And the buildings themselves, the accommodation.
The guide suggests aiming for structures that blend with nature, using those sustainable materials. Think eco-cabins, tree houses, maybe luxury bamboo villas.
Nice.
Interiors follow the same idea. Sustainable furnishings, energy-efficient LEDs, maximizing natural light, water-saving fixtures, sustainable flooring like bamboo or cork.
What about kitchens and common areas?
Same focus. Energy-efficient appliances, local materials if possible, and planning for waste reduction right from the start.
And integrating the island's own environment. That seems vital, especially for those sustainable visions.
Paramount. Landscaping with native plants looks right, supports wildlife, needs less water. Edible gardens for the kitchen. Maybe even habitat restoration, like fixing up wetlands or coral reefs if possible.
And efficient watering systems, I assume.
Definitely. Drip irrigation, mulching to save water. Every drop counts.
So back to the big utilities. Power.
Renewables are increasingly the way to go. Solar panels are obvious. Solar water heaters. Maybe biomass boilers.
And water, if there's no spring or well.
Desalination is often essential. And the key now is using green energy like solar to power those desalination systems, making them more sustainable.
Connectivity must be tricky, too.
Historically, yes. But the guide highlights things like Starlink as a game changer. Reliable high-speed internet is now possible in places where it was unthinkable before, or incredibly expensive.
Okay, last big one. Waste. You can't just put the bins out.
Absolutely not. Waste management has to be totally self-contained.
Yeah.
The goal is minimizing what goes to landfill, ideally zero. Comprehensive composting for organic stuff, rigorous recycling programs, biological treatment for wastewater using microbes to break it down. You might even treat black water, toilet waste, safely for irrigation.
Seriously?
It's possible with the right systems. Incineration is an option for non-recyclables, but needs careful handling because of emissions.
And who actually manages all this incredibly complex work?
The human element is huge. You need really experienced project managers, detailed schedules, strict quality control.
Finding skilled labor must be tough.
Especially workers trained in sustainable building. It's critical. And the guide rightly stresses labor welfare. Good conditions, fair wages, decent housing for the construction crews, that's vital.
And I guess even with perfect planning, things go wrong.
Oh, always. Contingency planning is essential. Weather delays are a massive factor on islands. Material shortages, design changes popping up, costs running over, emergencies. Building on an island just magnifies all those risks compared to the mainland.
Building something on this scale, even with sustainable goals, must still have a major environmental impact.
It absolutely does. That source looking at the Dubai artificial islands, it paints a pretty stark picture of the potential costs, especially when you're actually creating land.
What kind of impacts did they see there?
Well, the sheer volume of dredging pulling sand from the seabed to build the islands caused severe water clouding, siltation,
Meaning?
sediment blankets, and smothers vital marine habitats. Coral reefs, oyster beds reports mentioned up to 2 inches of sediment in places seagrass meadows. It harms the species living there, disrupts natural currents, which can then cause beach erosion somewhere else.
Wow.
And the dredging temporarily wiped out the local diving industry in Dubai. That's how bad the water quality got.
And wasn't some of this building happening in sensitive areas, protected reserves?
Yes, that was a major controversy, building in places like Palm Jebel Ali that were formerly marine reserves. Environmentalists argue, pretty forcefully, that you just can't replace complex natural habitats with artificial structures and expect it to be the same ecologically. It fundamentally alters the environment.
So what's the counter-argument? What do the developers say?
Nakheel, the developer in Dubai, basically acknowledges an impact, but argues they worked hard to mitigate it.
Oh.
They built artificial reefs, hired marine biologists,
Okay.
and their interesting claim is that the new habitats created the channels. The rocky breakwaters around the islands are actually flourishing now. They list things like seagrass, dolphins, rays, sharks, trevilly moving in.
Really?
They claim the species richness in these new areas is actually higher than what was there before, which was mostly just open water over a less diverse seabed.
Huh. So it's a really complex debate.
It is, balancing massive development ambitions against environmental responsibility. And clearly, there are very different takes on whether mitigation can truly replicate or even improve on a natural ecosystem.
It definitely raises questions about engineering nature for development.
Big questions with potentially lasting consequences.
Okay, so beyond the environment, beyond the construction challenges, there's this other reality we touched on. Security. Even on your remote island paradise.
Yeah, this is a less glamorous aspect, but according to that Forbes piece, it's increasingly prominent for the ultra-wealthy. A real surge in security fears.
What's driving it? Any specific reasons?
The article points to a few things. Growing resentment, maybe, linked to wealth inequality, some recent high-profile violent incidents targeting executives, shootings, kidnappings, arson, and apparently just a general increase in online threats directed at wealthy individuals.
That sounds unsettling. Does this translate into actual spending?
Directly. Demand for personal security services has jumped. One firm saw a 1,500% rise in threat assessment requests. Just finding credible providers is apparently a challenge now.
And the cost must be huge.
Enormous. Monitoring the internet for threats. $200K, $300 a year. Security drivers. $250K, $500K. Residential guards. $750K up to over $1 million annually.
$1 million a year for guards.
And a full executive protection team. $2 million plus. And sometimes companies foots the bill. Meta spent $24.4 million on security for Zuckerberg and his family last year.
$24 million? That can't just be for sitting around the house.
No, exactly. Zuckerberg reportedly pays extra out-of-pocket for protection during his adventurous hobbies, hydrofoiling, skiing, needs security staff trained for that stuff. He's estimated to have around 20 full-time security people.
20 people, wow. Is there one specific worry that stands out?
Child security comes up again and again. Kidnapping fears, abuse by staff, even accidents, it affects travel, even school choices. parents looking at security features.
You mentioned visible versus covert security earlier.
Right. Some millionaires might go for visible security guards out front, very obvious. One expert called it snow plowing. But billionaires and celebrities, especially with kids, often prefer covert protection.
Hmm.
Plainclothes teams, tracking devices, using different names, embedding security staff so they blend in, trying to give the kids a semblance of normal life.
So even on your supposedly secure private island, you still need all this. It seems almost paradoxical. It really highlights that the anxieties of the wider world don't just vanish when you buy a remote property. The same issues, inequality, vulnerability, visibility, they follow you. The security sector is booming to meet the demand, though the article suggests it might be temporary unless attacks keep happening. Memories can be short.
Okay, let's try and pull all these threads together then. We've gone from the romantic dream,
To the staggering costs, the grand visions,
the immense building challenges, the environmental balancing act.
and these rising security fears. What does this whole deep dive really tell us about private island ownership?
What's the takeaway? Well, it takes us way beyond that simple postcard image, doesn't it? These islands aren't just luxury toys. They're real places where enormous wealth gets used to bring deeply personal, sometimes quite radical visions to life.
Right, whether it's sustainability labs, global business hubs, pure luxury escapes, or these intense fortress-like private refuges.
Exactly. And it shows that even the ultimate escape needs colossal resources, involves serious environmental trade-offs.
And paradoxically, it doesn't actually free the owners from the security worries driven by the very world they're trying to separate from.
Looking through all the sources, the market data, the building guides, the environmental reports, the security analysis, you get a much richer, much more complex picture.
You really see the scale of the engineering, the planning, the money, and the complex human motivations behind it all.
It's this fascinating crossroads of wealth, geography, technology, ecology, and security, all shaping these unique little domains.
Indeed. And that pretty much brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thanks for exploring this complex reality with us, drawing on all these different perspectives.
It really does offer some profound glimpses into the priorities and maybe the pressures at the very top of that global wealth ladder.
So here is a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. Considering the immense resources, environmental costs, the security anxieties tied to owning these private domains, what does this growing desire for island kingdoms really tell us about the relationship the ultra-wealthy have with the rest of the world, and maybe the pressures they feel even within their ultimate escapes? Something to think about.